Hey, what's up guys? This is Katie with Fish Like a Cat. So as some of you might know, maybe a lot of you don't, Ryan and I both had 2018 Old Town Predator PBL kayaks. Unfortunately, we both had a defect in the body of our kayaks and part of our hulls cracked. Long story short, because Old Town is amazing, they were very quick to warranty our boats. So now we have brand new 2020 kayaks, perfect for starting off the new tournament season. So we're pretty stoked about it. But that means that I have to wire this whole kayak up, brand new lights, put a fish finder on it, all of the above. Now, one thing I've noticed is a lot of people are not super comfortable with doing this. They don't want to cut into their kayaks. They think it's immediately gonna burn into a pile of ashes. But I'm here to tell you that's totally not true. If you have the right tools, a little bit of knowledge, and you're not afraid to get a little crazy and improvise every once in a while, you can totally do this yourself. So my parts just arrived today from Amazon. I'll be installing this plate into the kayak. I had a different one before that had the smaller circle toggle switches, but over time they started wearing out. So I decided to switch to the rocker switches, which seem to be a lot more heavy duty. So we have that piece, and this time for lighting for the entire outside and inside of the kayak, I decided to actually go with lighting for the underside of a car. I decided to do this because, first of all, the lights seemed pretty beefy. They came with all the pieces that you need put together, and these ones were not expensive at all. I think I paid $30 for them, and it comes with the entire kit, and it even does ridiculous stuff like change colors, and you can throw a rave party from your kayak if you want to, apparently. So this is what our lighting is going to look like. Lots of pieces, lots of things, but as you can see, these are nice, thick lights that we're not gonna have to worry about tearing up too badly on the water. The only thing I can see as being a little bit of a problem, just looking at them right off the bat, is how wound they are. So I am going to go lay these out after I test them. Hopefully they'll straighten out while I'm getting everything else ready. But one of the key things when you're going to start doing lighting in your kayak, first of all, you always want to check your lights, because the very last thing you want to do is get this whole thing wired up, go to turn them on, and crap, your lights don't work. So now that we know our lights work, we're going to go ahead, I'm going to lay them out and try to put something heavy on them, get them to flatten out so they're not so tricky to work with. Pitting them somewhere in the kayak, and I'm also going to start figuring out exactly where I'm going to place this. In my previous kayak, I had it set right here. This was a really good mounting place for me. One thing I really dug about this panel in particular was the voltmeter that's right here. You'll see it light up when I test this. Underneath of that, it also comes with some USB chargers. They will surely come in handy on the water, especially tournament days when the service is crappy and it's just eating up your battery like crazy. These four are going to be for the lighting of the outside of my kayak. We're going to use them to light up the body so that other boats can see us when it's dark out, especially you guys that are launching before the sun's come up, or if you dig night fishing in a kayak, you need your lights. Even if it's just a little 360 light up on a pole with a flag, something. So these are the previous lights that we had used on our old kayaks. They're not necessarily terrible, but if you're the type of person that likes to get into heavy cover and you have to move your kayaks in and out of your truck a lot, or you're dragging them around by yourself a lot, I can tell you that on the outside, these guys are not the best choice. super duper cheap, super duper affordable. You will rip them to shreds. I ran a set on either side underneath of the side rails, and that lit my kayak up perfectly. You'll be able to see everything that's at your feet. So back to our switch plate. Another thing that you're gonna wanna do is take pictures of the wiring before you take this thing apart, because you're like, oh look, I can just slap this thing back together. I know what I'm doing. No, you don't. Once you start having to mess around with all this wiring and you have to pull all these plugs, you lose track of stuff. It's a real pain in the butt. So it's just easier, take your phone, take a picture of everything. That way you know where everything goes. Don't have to guess. Keep track of all of that. And when you take it apart, now you know how to put it back together. And before any of you guys ask the stupid question that inevitably somebody will ask, these tools, they're not Ryan. They're mine. Ryan has his own tools. Chicks can have tools just like we can fish and catch big tanks. Deal with it. So, like I said, we're going to dismantle this. Most of these come with some sort of switch or push downs that are holding the switches in, and anything that is of this shape, of a circular shape, is going to have a twist off in the back that will let it loosen up so that you can take it off. Alright guys, now that I have dismantled the plate, I've gotten all of the switches off and set everything aside, took a bunch of pictures so that I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and tape this down to give me an idea of where I'm going to sketch this out. Now, one thing that you'll want to keep in mind is where this plate is in relation to your pedals and your electronics and everything. I know a lot of people try to mount them in different places. I know Ryan wants to mount a set down here. That would work very well for him because his chair is slid back much farther than mine is. But with any sort of switches being underneath of me, it would actually be kind of a hassle to get to them. Plus, I'd have to run more wiring from everything because the battery is up front. So I've just found it's easier for me personally to mount this plate up front where I can easily reach it and flip stuff on and off. And you can keep an eye on your voltmeter so you know how much juice you've got left on your battery. I like to put these little corner marks on here to make sure that I can line stuff up on the panel in case I move it or when I take it off and then have to put it back on. That way everything should line up pretty well. So now we've got all of that done. One thing that will make this much easier is to remove these panels. That way I can see where I'm working. Don't have to work underneath of them. Another thing you're going to want to make sure you're doing before you're drilling into your kayak, you want to have a solid understanding of where everything is going to go. You don't necessarily have to have everything perfect, not at all, but you do need to understand where all of these things are going to come together, where the wiring all has to go to, and how you're going to feed all this stuff through before you go drilling holes in your kayak and then realize, crap, I didn't think about that thing or this section or whatnot. Now, one thing that I did install already prior to the start of this was my transducer, which I have going through the scupper mount on the bottom of here. I have noticed that it is a very tight fit. I have a Humminbird, so my transducer does fit underneath of these new 2020 models, but the bracket doesn't sit in there quite as well as it should. Actually, to be honest, I snapped my first bracket off because it hung out underneath of that scupper hole, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and it caught the bed of the truck the one night when we were putting them away, and it just exploded that bracket. So to get around that, I have this mounted actually with the mount upside down and just flip the transducer over. I'll take pictures of that so that you can see it to get an idea. It was the only way that I could seem to get it on there without it hanging over and risking damaging it again. So I know these are supposed to fit the Humminbird transducers perfectly. I apparently am not the only person that's had this problem, but hopefully with next model, they'll learn from this one and they'll make that opening just a little bit bigger. Even 1/2 an inch would make a world of difference. These things are gonna be ridiculously bright. It's gonna be awesome. And I want to make sure that I'm protecting these lights as much as I can. So I'm actually not gonna run them all the way up to where it starts to taper and level out, because I want that lip there to protect these lights a little more from bumping into stuff on the side. Where I have them sitting is actually nice and tight into the hull, so that this section of the hull will hit anything rather than these lights taking the abuse. And with the switches, what we're going to be doing is we're going to wire up. One switch will be for the interior lights, one switch will be for the exterior lights, and then we're also going to be mounting a couple of spotlights up on the front of the kayak, which I had on my previous kayak, and they're awesome. They're not expensive at all. They're totally reasonable to get. You can get these guys on Amazon. Once I put them all back together, they will sit up on their posts like this. I did have to modify them so that they would stay upright and straight because they weren't quite made to sit on a bracket that's so thin. But you can go to the hardware store and adjust it however you need it. I just found that this was the sturdiest way to do it, and it leaves it the option to pivot so that you can point your spotlight in different directions. Some of you people out there on the internet don't know that Mr. Ryan Backa, he can sing this song like a beast. You wouldn't even know it's not the real deal that's singing it. See, you didn't know that front rod holder was so useful, did you? But in all seriousness, I don't know how I ever lived without it. Now that I have it, totally spoiled. So, Old Town, if you're listening, best idea ever. This is actually the plate off of my old kayak. So I'm going to put it back on here. The only thing I am going to adjust is that I don't like that the side of my fish finder mount kind of hangs over and it doesn't quite sit flush to it. I would prefer not to drill the top of my kayak where the other two screw holes are. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of padding underneath of it. That way it'll get some support so it's not going to be pushing down on that side while I'm on the water and using my fish finder. This is a piece of felt blanket. It's the type of stuff that you put on your furniture when you don't want it to scratch the floor. So it's got an adhesive back. Now that's going to give my fish finder just a little bit more support right on the edge there, and now it's not going to torque down on it whenever I am pushing buttons and attaching my fish finder on and off. So that is actually incredibly easy. scariest part of doing this. Don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. Promise. All right. So now what we're gonna do is cut into the actual hull of the boat. We're gonna be going right where we're gonna mount all of our switches. As we're doing this, I'm kind of gonna cut it back bits at a time, pretty much how I did with the drilling holes for the lighting. This is kind of the same concept. You can always cut out a little more, but you can't put it back. So I'll try to cut out as little as I need to, but you know, it might take a little longer than expected. Dremels are awesome for stuff like this. And as always, safety first, just like your PFD, because the last thing I want to do is get blinded by a piece of freaking plastic from my kayak, because that'd be pretty lame. Now, one thing I'm double checking right now, using those marks that I had made before, I can line it up and see where exactly all of the holes should be. And the reason I'm checking this is I don't want to cut some of them too far one way or the other, otherwise it's not going to line up. So I can see that most of them need a little bit taken off the top and the bottom, and it looks like most of them need stuff taken off of the right side of each of the openings. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, each one of these clips, or switches, has clips on the back side of them that will clip them into place into this plate. I don't want to pop these all into place yet because it'll be much easier to wire them through the plate coming out here to work rather than working inside of the kayak. Total side note, I'm sure a lot of you have read or watched videos about people doing plastic welds on their boats. That's useful if you happen to crack your boat, drill a hole where you didn't mean to drill a hole, stuff like that. Now, we've not ever really had to do that with our PDLs other than when we had to get them warranted, but that was a different circumstance. However, when you cut big holes into your boat and you're putting in stuff like this, it wouldn't be a bad idea to hold on to the pieces that you cut out because these could come in handy later on, especially these larger pieces. Whenever you're having to do a plastic weld, these are like gold, and that way you don't have to shave pieces off from the inside of the kayak or somewhere inconspicuous. You've already got some spares. the wiring, in theory, is done.
In theory.
In theory.
Hi, boys. Hi. Hi.
We're like, oh my god, someone will pay attention to us, yeah! Isn't that true? Don't want stuff to fall over. And like, I did not hook anything up, like everything's hooked up other than taping stuff down.
Yeah.
So,
And taping it on.
yeah, it's either gonna work or it's not. But I think it's gonna work.
Yes. Oh, this is on. All your switches are on.
Snap! Alright, so,
Well, does that mean they have power? Oh yeah, it does. Okay.
derp. How would it light up?
Well, I thought this might light up
Stop. It will.
if it was on.
It's not. That's the off light. Snap! So this is interior.
What's that for?
Exterior. I'll freak out, but oh shit. No. I mean snap. Yeah. Alright. I wonder if they're left on. Ooh, nice. So I don't have to mess with it. In case I don't have that. Or
Right.
whatever. This would be left spotlight. Right spotlight. We actually have our first tournament of the season tomorrow. We will be fishing in the Kayak Anglers of Fort Worth, Lake Athens. If you don't know what KAFW is, I suggest you look them up. I will post a link to their Facebook down in the description of this video, but I want to give a big shout out to them. They are one of the local kayak fishing trails here in Texas. Another important thing when you're working with anything that's sticky adhesive stuff, you want to make sure your kayak is like room temperature. So my kayak has been sitting inside for the last 2 days prior to me doing this, purely so that it could get to room temperature, so it's not really hot or really cold. And that will also help to make the adhesive work really well. So you can see I've taped up both ends of this. I'm going to leave this back one taped up. Everything under here is cleaned. So we're going to start at one end, and the most important thing to do is to work slowly. I like to take the end up just so that the whole sticker stays straight and you don't end up going down to an angle. I personally like to use anything that's rounded, that's got a nice smooth edge to it, just to go over every single one of these letters from top to bottom to make sure that they are very, very stuck to the surface. This is another one of those tedious things. It's like not the most fun thing to do, but if you do it right the first time, they will absolutely last you the entire season at a minimum, as long as you don't scratch them or drag them across a tree. Now this is just like laying it on. You take this top piece off and you'll be left with a pretty decal. You just have to go slowly sometimes. And there you go. Perfectly applied decal, nice and straight. It's that easy. That probably took, what, like 5-10 minutes or so. So, now we're going to do the other side. Like I mentioned earlier, if you don't know who KAFW is, you should look them up. I will include a link to them below this video. I'll also include links to NTXKC, Hobie BOS, and BASS. And I would just like to mention right now that the reason I'm only mentioning those 4 entities are they're the trails that I'm personally fishing, and for no other reason. So, all that is done. So last year, I had a Targaryen sigil on the front of my kayak. But this year, I figured I would change it up. And I just can't help myself. So I think this year I'm going to let Anthony Kiedis guide the way. Well, that's probably the coolest freaking decal ever. You can't go wrong with Red Hot Chili Peppers, you really can't. This up here so don't forget it for tomorrow, which by the way, if you don't know what an arrow strap is, you should totally get one. They're useful for like pretty much everything. We won a couple of, or we got to bring home a couple of these after the Lone Star Throwdown 2 years ago, and they are still going strong, and we love using them for our kayaks. I'll also put a link for them down below. Personally, we use them, we drop our rods in here when they're in the back of the truck, and then we can lash the line here and then they don't go anywhere. Alright, so we have our interior lights. We have 2 spotlights. Bam! Right up in your grill. And then we have our freaking exteriors. Because who doesn't like feeling like they're in Beetlejuice? So, yeah, it's pretty freaking awesome. So, first super long video that I've ever done. Hopefully the editing will not make it suck. But yeah, if you guys like this video, definitely drop some comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If there's anything you want to see in the future, please let me know. And I will get around to it as I can. Our schedule this year is pretty busy, but like I said, I'll do what I can for you. So yeah, let's see how tomorrow goes. Hopefully all this stuff will pay off. Definitely go visit my website. I will include a link for that below as well, just in case you didn't notice the 47 different times that we looked at the decals. It is www.fishlikeacat.com. Who's the moose? Say, look at this filthy floor, because it's all muddy in the backyard. There's a kitten. Little bear. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. I know, does that smell interesting? Oh, it's stretching. Oh, puppies. Slobber everywhere. That's great. Tasty. Come here. Disgusting. Tucker? Tucker cat? Best cat in the world? Oh, look, a fish tank.